Alright, yeah, welcome back to some more Magic Arena, and this week I am not only bringing you a deck that is rotation proof, but I actually do deeply feel that this deck gets more powerful actually as rotation occurs, because there's a lot of cards leaving the format, but there's also a lot of cards in Guilds of Ravnica that are going to make this deck better based on the amount of cards that have to actually leave the deck. So this week we're going to be looking at a green-black sweet value deck. So this is actually green-black Reanimator, essentially. Built around the card Journey to Eternity. So Journey to Eternity is a 1, a black, and a green legendary enchantment in Aura. So you enchant a creature you control, and if that creature dies, or when it dies, return it to the battlefield under your control. Then the Journey to Eternity transforms on the battlefield under your control as well. So you end up getting Argyll, Cave of Eternity. So legendary land, adds 1 mana of any colour, which is nice. It's a bit of ramp. But it also, the reason that you have this land is for its ability. 3, a black and a green, to return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So we can't take our opponent's creatures, but we are running an obnoxiously large amount of creatures in our deck anyway. So, you know, we're not really going to need to steal any of our opponents, because a lot of ours are going to deal with our opponent's stuff anyway. So that's the idea behind this deck. So we're going to be running things like Merfolk Branchwalker, which is 1 and a green, 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, it explores. So it looks at the top card, it either puts a land into our hand, which allows us to hit our land drops, because we are quite top heavy, so we can play all of our stuff. Or if it's a creature or non-creature, anyway, a non-land permanent, we get to choose to either put it into the graveyard or leave it on top and put a counter on our Branchwalker. So this allows us to either fill our graveyard for the Journey of Eternity, remove a card that might be bad and put it in the graveyard, or simply leave it on top if it is a god tier draw. We also have 2 copies of Jadelight Ranger, which does essentially the same thing. However, it costs 1 extra green mana and it explores twice instead, so it does the same ability 2 times instead of 1. So it's really nice value there, and nice to reanimate a Jadelight Ranger. We're not running more of these because the double green is a little annoying. We have Thrashing Brontodon as a 1-of. We do run a lot of utility creatures in this deck, so Thrashing Brontodon is our main board answer to artifacts and enchantments. We're only running 1 because as soon as we found 1, then Journey to Eternity will allow us to repeatedly use it. There's actually a fun little combo with Thrashing Brontodon. If you play Thrashing Brontodon on 3, and then turn 4, you Journey to Eternity your Thrashing Brontodon, which leaves you up with 1 mana. You can pay the 1 mana to sacrifice Thrashing Brontodon to target Journey to Eternity to destroy it. However, before Thrashing Brontodon's trigger destroys it, the Journey to Eternity trigger takes effect and flips the land. So this is actually a turn 4 Journey flip, which gets us to 5 mana, which allows us to play things like Liliana and things of that nature, maybe even a Familiar plus Branchwalker. We're going to be going for a value-based deck here, so the idea is that we really do benefit from the Journey to Eternity flipping. However, we can get by just fine without it. So we're running a lot of creatures that do a lot of enter the battlefield effects, but also a lot of things that are very nice if we can get them to stick. So Filigree Familiar is a good one. 3 mana for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life. So we want this for aggro-based decks. And when it dies as well, we draw a card. So it gains us life, which is what aggro does not want us to do. And then when we chump block with it, we actually draw a card. And if we can manage to get a Filigree Familiar to die and go repeatedly back with an Argyll, that's a serious amount of life gain there. So if Hazaret, which is a problem for this deck, sticks around on the board, also rotating for the record, if it sticks around for quite some time, then that's 5 damage that we can't really stop from coming in. However, if we are repeatedly reanimating Filigree Familiars, we're actually gaining 2 life, blocking a Hazaret, drawing a card, reanimating it, gaining 2 life, blocking it, drawing a card. So really just stonewalling our opponent. And that's another thing that this deck does really well, is just prevent our opponent from attacking. Because if you can put Journey to Eternity on a really flimsy creature like a Merfolk Branchwalker, and they have no way of exiling Branchwalker or bouncing it, what that essentially means is your opponent can no longer attack you until they find an answer to this. So it buys you a lot of time to make your land drops so that we can get to things like our Carnage Tyrants and stuff like that. Should speak about the top end of the deck as well. we've got 2 copies of Polaka Worm. You don't really want to see this one in your hand, but having it into the graveyard is pretty disgusting. It's almost a turbocharged Filigree Familiar. So 4 and 3 green for a 7/7 trample. That's 7 mana for a 7/7 trample is pretty great. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 7 life. Pretty good. Allows us to stabilize with a huge booty on the board as well. Pretty much will stop everything coming along the way, short of a Golter or something like that. But we do have answers to Golters and things of that nature. When it dies, we get to draw a card as well. So if they do somehow manage to get through, similar to the Hazaret block, you know, if it manages to push through and kills it, then we can reanimate it and we get double value from it dying and from it reanimating. We also have Carnage Tyrants as well, which are one of the best green creature cards in the format. 4 mana and 2 green for a 7/6 that cannot be countered, so it's amazing against control decks. And it also has Trample and Hexproof, which makes it hard to interact with. Doomfall and Board Wipes are about the only thing that's going to deal with this. And to be honest, Doomfall is not too bad for us because we have a lot of low-to-the-ground creatures with Branchwalker and Jadelight, so we can often sack those in response to a Doomfall. And if they wipe our board, well, we can rebuild with an Atzel, so it's not too bad there. And honestly, killing a lot of our creatures ends up giving us value, similar to Noxious Gearhulk. Noxious Gearhulk is a 4 and 2 black for a 5/4 with Menace, which makes it hard to block. This does rotate, and it's going to be sad to see it go, but for now, it is going to be a pretty sweet card until then. So 2 copies of this. When it enters the battlefield, we may destroy another target creature. If a creature is destroyed this way, we gain life equal to its toughness. So yet again, a nice stabilizing card against an early game aggro deck. We can put down a decent body that gets in the way of a lot of their creatures, kills one in the process, and gains us life. So it's going to blank another attack from our opponent. We have 4 copies of Ravenous Chupacabra, the absolute MVP of this deck in terms of removal. 2 and 2 black for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you destroy target creature and opponent controls. Sadly, we can't destroy our own creature. That would be great with a Journey to Eternity. I don't know if we're getting a card that would be an improvement on Chupacabra in that sense, you know. I would like a Chupacabra effect with the ability to kill our own creature for the Journey to Eternity trigger. But until then, Ravenous Chupacabra is a solid option. Like, we can kill a creature, block a creature, maybe chump, reanimate, kill a creature, block a creature, that kind of thing. So, speaking of killing our own creatures, we actually are running an M19 card that hasn't seen a lot of play recently. And it's slightly gimmicky, I would say, in this deck, but it does have some serious applications as well. So 2 and 2 black for a 6/6 flying trample. Pretty sweet. However, the downside is that as an additional cost to cast this spell, we have to sacrifice a creature. So it's not the end of the world if we have to sacrifice a Branchwalker in order to play our demon. However, it's just straight upside as that additional cost if the thing that we are sacrificing has a Journey to Eternity to attach to it. So if we have maybe our Jadelight Ranger with a Journey on it, we can sacrifice it on turn 4, which will then kill the creature, return the creature from Journey, and we get a demon with no downside. A 6/6 flyer in the air is pretty disgusting. I've had a lot of like Psymaster Thopterist decks coming up against this one recently, and this is the way to just get right through all of those Thopter tokens. Great way to push through. We do have a lot of Trample and a lot of Menace, so we have a lot of evasive creatures all the same. So it's pretty sweet. Against control, we've got 2 copies of Argyll's Bloodfast. So 1 and a black, we can pay 2 life, and 1 and a black again to draw a card. So what we like to do with this one is draw a metric ton of cards. Try to get to 5 life if we can, because if we get to 5 life, we actually get Temple of Aklazotz. Something like that. Adds 1 black mana. The thing that we want it for, though, is the ability to sacrifice a creature, gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness. So if you think about this land being flipped, it is a way of getting creatures into our graveyard. So let's use Polaka Worm as a god tier example. So we play Polaka Worm, we gain 7 life. We then sacrifice Polaka Worm, we gain 7 life, we draw a card. We probably have Atzel on board, so we pay 5 life to reanimate Polaka Worm, we gain 7 life. We then crack the Polaka Worm with the Temple, gaining 7 life, drawing a card. rinse and repeat, and our opponent cannot win. That kind of thing. It's pretty much like Approach of the Second Sun is the only thing that's going to save our opponent through that wonderful little loop. Speaking of which, Approach does rotate, so that's another bad matchup for us that's leaving the format. So there's a lot of bad matchups that are leaving the format right now. Don't know if there's going to be more bad matchups entering the format. Who knows, really? So time will tell on that one. So I tried to keep this as creature-focused as I possibly could, but it turned out that a lot of the decks that we were struggling against actually were outvaluing us before we could get Chupacabra chains in, things like that, destroying creatures. So I'm actually running 4 copies of Fatal Push. So Fatal Push is a 1 mana instant speed, destroy target creature if its converted mana cost is 2 or less, but it also has Revolt, which says we may destroy a creature if it has converted mana cost 4 or less. So to trigger Revolt, we actually need to have a permanent leave the battlefield. Now we have Thrashing Brontodons to kill themselves, we have Demons in order to sacrifice creatures, but the key one here is Evolving Wilds. Evolving Wilds sacrifices itself to search for a basic land card, and that will trigger Revolt without actually reducing our board state. So Fatal Push is going to rotate. However, we do get from Guilds of Ravnica a Necrotic Wound, which is a 1 black instant speed with Undergrowth. This is one of the new mechanics that I think is really going to boost the deck. It's essentially a creatures in graveyards matter mechanic. It says target creature gets -X until the end of the turn, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard, and if that creature would die, exile it instead. So it actually gets around indestructible, and the mana cost as well is largely irrelevant. So Necrotic Wound will replace Fatal Push when it comes to that. So there's a lot of things. We also have Assassin's Trophies coming in as well, so maybe I don't even need Necrotic Wound. Maybe I just go with Assassin's Trophy, which is a 2 mana green and a black to kill any permanent and give them a land. It's pretty much, it's bonkers broken. So that's essentially the deck. I think I've spoken about everything, except for Liliana, actually. Liliana does rotate, but she is solid right now. 5 mana for a 5 loyalty Planeswalker. We can tick up to fill up our graveyard and make a zombie. We can -3 to reanimate, so we get back our Noxious Gearhulks, our Palaka Worms and things like that for -3. And a -7 is a board wipe for us as well. Should be noted that it says destroy all non-zombie creatures, and her -3 actually turns creatures into zombies when she reanimates them. So it's not an entirely one-sided board wipe, though. We don't really mind wiping part of our board away since we are using our graveyard quite effectively. So that's essentially the deck anyway, guys. Onto the mana base. We've got 7 swamps, 7 forests. Nice even mana base here. 3 copies of Blooming Marsh. You probably want a 4th copy, but this card is rotating. We do get Sorry, that's me, guys. I'll have to stop that right now. We do get a green-black Shockland in the next format, so we will be able to replace Blooming Marsh, and we're also keeping Woodland Cemeteries as well, which synergize very well with that one. So our mana base is actually going to improve post-rotation as well. Woodland Cemetery comes into battlefield tapped unless you control a swamp or a forest. The new Shocklands are going to be swamps and forests, so we get double black and double green on turn 2, which helps for these Jade Light Rangers. And yeah, that's essentially a deck. Onto the sideboard, so we have to cover a lot of things. The one downside of the deck is that Graveyard Hate is very annoying, so we're bringing in Sorcerer's Spyglass because it takes care of Scarab Gods, which will rotate, so we might not need this card in the foreseeable future, but until then, Scarab God is actually disgusting, so we want to make sure that we are naming Scarab God with that. We can also bring it in against Teferi decks and things like that as well. We can name Teferi, can't use his abilities. We have 4 copies of Duress as well for control. A target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose a non-creature, non-land card from it, and that player discards that card. So gets rid of removal, gets rid of counter spells to allow us to free up anything that we play. We also have Kitesail Freebooter to take out non-creature spells. It's in here kind of for control, but also it can hit a lot of things in most mid-range decks and things like that. 2 copies of Lost Legacy for control decks, so a Reservoir Storm deck is very bad for us because we can't really gain over 50 life by the time they win. But Lost Legacy can name like Paradoxical Outcome, which can severely slow down our opponent. It obviously can't hit Aetherflux Reservoir, but it can hit some good stuff in the process. I've had like an Antiquities War deck come up against this one. Lost Legacy names Antiquities War, they can't win. That kind of situation. You want to bring this one in when the card you are naming is going to severely up your odds of winning. We got 3 copies of Prowling Sepopard as a decent creature, can't be countered, and stops our creatures from being countered. So yet again, in here for the control matchups, we can reanimate this one to prevent our opponent from ever countering our creatures when they hit the board. But they're not going to be able to counter them when we reanimate them either, so we've got that going for us. Finally, 2 copies of Thrashing Brontodon, 3 mana 3/4. We can bring this in against artifacts and enchantments. We can also use it with our Journey to Eternity as that little combo I mentioned earlier as well, so the deck only improves with the Thrashing Brontodon coming in, even if our opponent doesn't play anything worth killing. So that's going to be the deck anyway, guys. I do hope you enjoy it. This is a very much rotation-proof deck. The things that we are losing are Fatal Push, but they get replaced by another uncommon in the format. We're losing Filigree Familiar. Not entirely sure what I'm going to replace this with, but I'm sure there are some cards that can fill that void all the same. I think there are some like life gain creatures that we can put in this place. Other than that, Liliana is leaving, but we can just go more value as we are anyway. Yeah, that's about it. Noxious Gearhulk, we can bring in more removal. There's just so much. Like, these two going out pretty much frees up, like, Assassin's Trophy as removal, so we don't really need the life gain as much if we're just destroying things, and Liliana is just nice. I don't think anything in the sideboard really goes. Lost Legacy, I suppose, but Lost Legacy is naming cards that are rotating anyway, so we don't have to worry too much about that. Prowling Sepopard. Control is probably going to go down a little bit in power level, so the use of Sepopard is also probably going to go down a wee bit as well. But it's nice to have right now in this current format. I do hope you guys have enjoyed the deck tech anyway. Be sure to check out the matches that have already been uploaded. There'll be a link to them in the description as well as at the end card of this video as well. So if you stick around, there'll be a button you can click to watch the matches. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have, like, subscribe, hit that little bell icon, all that jazz, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.